were in the heart of Worcestershire, fitting for a man who loved rural life so deeply, though his fortune came from industry. Astley Hall was the home of Stanley Baldwin. Hard to imagine in this peaceful setting, but he became one of Britain's most controversial prime ministers, though after he had left office, with many achievements to his credit. 3 times Prime Minister, serving 3 kings, he steered Britain through the general strike and the abdication crisis. But later he was accused of failing to do enough to rearm Britain in the face of the Nazi threat. That view persisted for decades, but recent academic research has largely restored his reputation as a Tory, one nation, unifying figure between the wars. The house has a Jacobean appearance, but it was actually built in the 19th century. He extended the house, building this clock tower. The Baldwins were well off. The family fortune was in iron and steel. And in 1908, Stanley Baldwin succeeded his late father as MP for the safe Conservative seat of Bewdley. Astley Hall today is a care home and greatly changed since Stanley Baldwin's day. But he would recognise the panelling and the carved ceiling in the reception hall. Though his political work kept him for so much of the time at Westminster, he always made a point of coming down here to Astley for Christmases and holidays to renew his association with his beloved Worcestershire. And here's a photograph of a Christmas gathering. It includes Rudyard Kipling, who was Stanley Baldwin's first cousin, and said of Baldwin, Stan's the real writer in the family, praising his command of the English language. During the Great War, and for a few years afterwards, the Conservatives joined the Liberals in coalition government. But Baldwin had grave misgivings about the coalition, and in particular about Lloyd George's leadership. In a pivotal speech at the Carlton Club in London in 1922, he persuaded most of his fellow Tories to split from the coalition and became Chancellor in the new Conservative administration. When Bonar Law stepped down due to ill health in 1923, Stanley Baldwin became Prime Minister. But these were turbulent times, with parties in turmoil and economic issues pressing. The 1923 election produced a hung parliament and a Labour minority government. It took another election in 1924 for the Conservatives to gain a comfortable majority. And by now Baldwin was establishing his personal style. This panelling and wooden staircase conveys some of that, traditional, sturdy, reliable. In the 1920s, Baldwin mastered, to a far greater extent than any other politician of the day, the new technology of the wireless. His regular fireside chat radio talks engaged directly with the listeners and greatly boosted his popularity.
I think it is a good thing at a time like the present to take stock, as it were, of our national characteristics and generally to investigate where it is that we derive what we call our English character and how it is fitted to help us in the struggle that lies before us.
And what he celebrated time and again was national character and its deep historical roots in rural England. He loved walking long distances in the countryside. But this was a time of industrial strife. Baldwin tried to moderate the hardliners in his party who wanted to take a tough line against the unions. But he couldn't prevent the general strike, which threatened to tear Britain apart in 1926, closing mines, transport and power stations. But thanks largely to him, the strike ended after 10 days. During the Depression of the early 1930s, he served in the national government coalition under Ramsay MacDonald. Baldwin backed plans for more autonomy for India, which brought him into sharp conflict with Winston Churchill. But the issue made Churchill look out of touch. Baldwin went on to his third term as Tory Prime Minister in 1935.
Once again, these were difficult times, particularly with the growing threat of conflict in Europe. The stress began to get to Baldwin, and he suffered some sort of mental breakdown in the early months of 1936.
But later that same year he rallied and steered the nation through the abdication crisis, when the public finally learned of Edward VIII's relationship with the American divorcee, Wallis Simpson. The romance had made global headlines, but had been kept out of the British press.
It's rather hard to imagine now, but back then the romance and the king's decision to give up the throne for love sent shockwaves through the nation. Baldwin won great plaudits for steadying the ship, particularly through his noble speeches in Parliament. When Baldwin retired in 1937, taking a peerage as Earl Baldwin of Bewdley, he was a revered figure. But on the outbreak of war in 1939, his reputation plummeted. Following the retreat from Dunkirk in 1940, he was condemned as one of the so-called guilty men, accused of failing to rearm Britain to take on the Nazi threat. Recent historical research, however, has established clearly that Baldwin launched a major rearmament program in 1934, which was enlarged in the ensuing years. I take the view that though a man of peace, Baldwin did not neglect his duty to prepare the nation for a possible war.
Stanley Baldwin died at Astley Hall in 1947. For many decades, this stone in the hamlet of Astley was the main local memorial to him. And that is where the story might have ended.
But in the autumn of 2018, after a long campaign in which I was involved, this statue of him was unveiled in Bewdley. Stanley Baldwin stands in the centre of the town, surveying the place that he represented for so long in Parliament, and where his memory continues to be held in great affection.